on this computer. Should all get a notification that that's happened. And over to you, Ellie and Ash.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you so much, Claire and the Will to Give team for having us. I can't tell you how lovely it is to be back in the Will to Give fold. For anyone who doesn't know me, I suppose legacy giving has been part of pretty much every role that I've undertaken in my fundraising career, whether that was at Chest, Heart and Stroke, Northern Ireland Hospice, Maggie Centres over in Scotland. So I've got quite a broad experience of developing and implementing legacy giving strategy, and especially, might sound a bit strange, but bringing gifts and wills to a warm audience. So as Claire said, I've been involved with Will to Give. It was 7 years, I think, as a committee member and 3 years as a chair, but it's so great to be back. And thank you everybody who has come today. Both Ash and I very much hope we're going to send you back out into that big fundraising world with a little bit of fresh inspiration anyway, and some fire in your bellies. I know some of you will be, really, really good legacy experts, and others are just starting your legacy journey. So we'll try and cover elements that has relevance to everybody that's taken part. As Claire said, we're sort of going to break it down into, as far as I can see, 4 sort of elements to today's discussion. And we don't have slides, we're kind of freewheeling it. So if you have any questions, I'd be really grateful if you could sort of pop them down and maybe we'll tackle them at the very end. I'm going to run through some strategic considerations and then in how that flows into sort of the operational, and that's where the KPIs will also fit in. And then Ash is going to lead on really the execution. So looking at those cost-effective gifts and wills materials that are really, really compelling for your audience. So slight apologies. I'm going to start on a very slight negative. So this is just a little bit of background. Now, some of you, I do have the feeling you're going to be more than aware of this, but I always think it's the context, the big picture is useful when it comes to thinking about any kind of strategy. And I suppose this fact always just cracks me up. So I think we've all seen, and I'm sure it's fair to say, that sustained investment in giving and wills is vital. It is. There's as far as I'm concerned, there's no argument. But to capitalize on this opportunity, we quite often need to see a bit of investment in this area. And the sensible thing is to make it sustained. So despite the growth in recent years of legacy marketing, it's still very much underinvested in. And I think one of the stats that Legacy Foresight, their sort of their latest marketing benchmarking study, it really brought this home for me. So legacy marketing, as we stand, accounts for just 4% of fundraising investment, but legacy income accounts for 44% of fundraised income. So for me, that's always it's just so stark. It has gone up 1% in 3 years, but surely we can do a wee bit better. It's a serious mismatch when it comes to the levels of income that we see. So I've got no doubt that many of you will have had conversations with your leadership teams that legacies need to be invested in. It has to be a way of life for charities. It's not something that can always take the hit when it comes to revising those expenditure lines. So that little snapshot of the big picture hopefully helps in terms of making a bit of a case, but leads us in quite neatly into what needs to happen next. So when it comes to looking at your strategy, looking at your operational plans, I think a fundamental is having a look at careful, detailed research. Really helps when it comes to the development of a robust strategy. And when it comes to this, this can be desk research, this can be work that you can undertake yourself, but some of the key metrics to think about, and hopefully, I'm really hopeful that you have a supporter database in place and that some of the legacy stuff will have been captured there. So things to think about whenever it comes to scoping out what the picture is for you guys within your charities. One is looking at the sort of residual and pecuniary legacy giving, obviously number, the income, but looking at percentage split as well. Looking at legators as previous supporters can be useful too. I mean, I think we know that quite a lot of legators, there's not that information on the supporter database, but a few of the organizations I've seen and I've worked with closely have seen that through careful monitoring, they're starting to build a much better picture of the people who are on the database who go on to give that lasting gift. The next element to consider is looking at that demographic information that you might hold on your legator. So if there's age at death, marital status, maybe housing tenure status, that's all useful stuff when it comes to building the picture of who your legators are. And again, Claire has mentioned the notification service. So specifically in Northern Ireland, but obviously they're similar elsewhere. So having a look at your notifications and your notification system and doing really good analytics around that. And I would also say that starting to think about your pledger or your intender inquirers and start thinking about how you monitor them, and obviously looking at what kind of communications they're getting, what they're getting in the cycle. Of course, good old SWOT and PESTLE are always going to be handy tools as well when it comes to starting to think about this research. As long as they're being reviewed regularly, you keep the information live, and that will help keep your strategy relevant. So when it comes to a really robust strategy, it's worth combining both qualitative and quantitative measures. So my brain always thinks that the quantitative ones are that little bit, I suppose, more straightforward in many ways. For example, some quantitative options could be, so begin to achieve legacy income within 5 years, maybe if you're not in a position where you're receiving legacy gifts currently. Something like achieving a 20% increase in your net legacy income from X pounds to Y pounds, and obviously you need to put a time scale in there. So it could be also thinking about maximizing your number of legacy gifts, and that could be from X to Y by a certain year, so 2027, say within the 5 years, or some thinking along the lines of maybe uplifting residuary gifts by 10%, say within the next 3 years. So far, so straightforward. I think when we think about the qualitative considerations, these can be much broader in scope often. So I've got a range of them. I think there's about 5 or 6 that I'll talk you through. One would be developing a strong legacy proposition. I think this is something that we quite often hear, but trying to break down what that actually means is going to be super helpful, and will be a real bonus when it comes to extending your strategy into operational activity. So with the legacy proposition, the focus itself needs to be very much on the visionary. It's about planting a seed essentially and demonstrating what Gifts and Wills can achieve. One thing is to never assume that your supporters know that you need legacies. You do need to make that clear to them. And one of the key questions to think about when it comes to this is, why should I leave a gift in my will, and what difference can it make? To create action, there needs to be emotion. There needs to be something that's going to spur someone to do that thing, which is to go and make a will and include you in it. But this is really distinct from an appeal ask, from a cash appeal or regular giving appeal. You don't have the urgency of here and now with a legacy. So it can be really tricky to anticipate and convey what's going to be needed and has to be achieved in 30 years' time, essentially, and that's across a whole generation. But I would say, and bear with me, but this is something we are very good at Pebblebeach, and I would say it is one of our massive strengths. And I'm saying that sitting on the other side, having worked for charities and made use of ourselves. So key features include demonstrating the impact, embedding this in a sense of optimism and empowerment, and clearly illustrating the difference made. So the next strategic aim would be thinking about developing a robust legacy campaign and ongoing marketing plans. So again, this is where we invest in sensitive and ethical campaigns and associated marketing plans, following the codes of best practice. Sounds great. But the reality is sometimes, and again, I'm guessing you may have come across this, I certainly did, and have done more than once, unfortunately. Organizations quite often treat legacy activity as a bit of a one-hit wonder. We did a mailing back in 2013, and somehow that's the box ticked for legacy marketing for however long. To be as successful as possible, it needs regular attention, it needs tailored approaches, and you need to consider your warm and cold audience. I'll talk a wee bit more about that in a moment. You need to think about who you're communicating with and how they want to respond. And, we recognize that quite often priority is about landing that direct marketing appeal. We would suggest you look way beyond that and look at capitalizing and maximizing the impact of this key communication, getting the most value out of it as possible. So the third strategic aim that I'm going to expand on is developing engaging and accessible supporter materials. So again, we could think about something, an output as like an inquirer brochure as such. That could be a cornerstone of this aim. That's just the start. So again, this is the time to capitalize on this opportunities, engaging with your supporters, so that if and when they write their will, your charity is front of mind. It's also vitally important that the information about will writing and leaving a bequest is really accessible to your supporters, whether it's on your website, whether it's sitting with staff, community fundraisers out there, whether it's with your volunteers. The key thing is to think about getting these materials and getting information out there in a way that's as straightforward as possible. With an inquirer brochure, you want to be able to try and preempt as much as possible of those potential legator inquiries so that they have everything to hand. And it's worth me to think a little bit about what your stewardship journey might look like. It might be worth indicating that in your brochure too. So one way to think about really engaging with people through the brochure, for example, is to think about the people that your pledgers, inquirers, intenders, whoever they are, your supporters essentially, will connect with. So we like to think of these as your legacy champions. So thinking about the people that you want to feature that's really going to hook them and pull them in and make that connection. So somebody could be somebody in your service team, somebody who's extremely passionate about your charity's work. And I'm sure all of you have somebody in mind, someone who knows how to explain things and their passion just flows through them. You could have family members who have had personal experience. Of course, you can include your chief executive, but make sure they keep on track when it comes to following that legacy vision. You can have a legacy advisor potentially if you're fortunate enough to have somebody in-house who can talk, who can answer questions or give a bit of advice around making a gift to your charity. Legacy pledgers are always hugely important, but the key thing with them is to ensure they are relatable. You don't want somebody who is perceived as being way up here and that disconnect would happen. And obviously somebody who's benefited from the work of their charity. There's nothing more compelling. So remember, gifts and wills are always a little bit different to other income streams. Sometimes you don't make the ask, sometimes it's about planting the seed as such, and then celebrating and demonstrating what gifts and wills can achieve. other qualitative strategic aims. So one really key one, and I think quite often gets dropped off the agenda, is about delivering an effective stewardship plan. So this is about thinking about your key groups of supporters, what you want to communicate with them, once they hand raise what their intentions are, and also think about who is best to do it, because for some of these people, a one-to-one connection can often be crucial, and they will go on to become real ambassadors, and quite often real legacy ambassadors, which are amazing to have. Again, I would say you have to think back to focus on recording the information correctly, making sure that, for example, if you have an inquiry leaflet, there's a response form mechanism, you have to make sure that what is reflected there, then what happens next, and that has to be facilitated by potentially a supporter care or an administration team. So they need to have all the information, be fully briefed to take that supporter on the next step of the journey appropriately. That might come down to sitting and working with teams to develop data attributes or flags that are needed, just fulfill any expectations as efficiently as possible. The next element that I want to flag is about effective training of key players. Now, I appreciate this can be a fun one to initiate, but it is really, really imperative when it comes to integrating the importance of legacy giving and ensuring consistency of message. So this is about, hopefully, ensuring all key stakeholders, whether that's board, volunteers, council members, support group members, making sure they are trained. Now, it doesn't have to be super formal, but making sure they're empowered to be able to talk comfortably about legacy giving and that they really understand the importance of it. You think about that in terms of new recruits and refresher support, so that that this is offered on a rolling basis. Again, it doesn't happen once 10 years ago and is never revisited. And again, local solicitors are a key cohort here. Think seriously about your engagement of this influential group, way beyond the sort of odd newsletter potentially, especially if you're thinking about will-making scheme, if that's a key focus for your organisation. And then the last qualitative strategic aim I'm going to touch on is all about that effective recording, tracking, and reporting. Really importantly, now we understand with legacy giving, it can be quite a number of years. Often, I think the industry average quotes 5 years before you're going to see a return on your investment in terms of financial income. However, there's lots of different elements and KPIs that can help you with your performance and long-term evaluation to make sure, for example, the board is reassured that activity is yielding results and you're on track. So again, not just legacy income, we're thinking about legacy data, so the sort of desk research element that we did touch on, obviously tracking your pledgers and tenders, inquirers, thinking about legacy conversations. This one quite often gets missed off the list, but is really, really important and really good when you have gone out there, you've empowered your team, and they're reporting back and you're starting to get that sort of really nice feedback loop. Thinking about your legacy ambassadors who can go out and represent as well. And then your standard sort of mailing, email responses, making sure that that's all incorporated into your legacy reporting. And also one last one is looking at the people who are telling you they don't want to have this communication or they don't want to receive any information. Worth keeping an eye on that as well. So all of that comes together into a smashing ops plan. So I suppose a question, just thinking about it, does your organizational strategy break down to a deliverable, effective ops plan with effective KPIs? With all signed direct marketing plans, me personally, I feel the most effective structure is to build things on two tenets. One is your recruitment and one is on your development. So of course, focusing on bringing on board cold prospects and also developing supporters. With legacy, I'd also recommend seizing the opportunity that presents itself to integrate with other activity, including supporter care. So today I'm going to give you a wee flavour of what goes into, I would say, the most successful legacy operational plans. There's some here, it's a bit of a pick and mix, but I do think most legacy plans could benefit from these. So thinking about our cold activity, first and sure everybody understands the importance of having sound online content now. So I think one of the key things I would always recommend is having some content, reinvigorating it where necessary, and set up reminders as well for regular reviews and updates. Try and keep this information, as live and relevant as possible. So the next point would be to think about your digital channels. So quite often, I recognize it's not fundraising, have a sort of a lead role with digital. It's often, in conjunction with the comms team. So I do recommend, in conjunction with looking at expanding your promotional reach using digital channels, maybe developing a social media calendar to the activity. Another element would be to work with your comms team, thinking about a PR calendar, so potentially capitalizing on dates and times, when there's noise. So whether it's the 2 Free Wills month, March and October, Will Relief month in Scotland. Oh no, sorry, yes, that's at September. International Legacy Giving Day, and of course Will to Give Northern Ireland activity. Another consideration, again, in terms of tracking, but I do know of organisations that maybe back in the day had some real success through specific targeting. And this is looking at investing in advertising space and advertorial. Again, like I say, back in the day, Chest, Heart and Stroke actually saw real success through targeting high value supporters and very quick. Then the final sort of cold activity would be potentially looking at reviewing a will making scheme and having a look at what I think the major thing for that for me is looking at resourcing, how you manage that, because sometimes that can become an industry in itself. So it's about having a look at that and seeing what the balance is. Element to consider is in your operational plan is the warm activity you're going to do. Weirdly, I have found in some organizations that this bit seems to drop off the radar. And I think it's because there's potentially a reluctance to go out to warm supporters and a nervousness about having the legacy conversation. But we know, these are the most likely guys. And so we have to factor into our plan. So we can think about a biannual legacy campaign as such, with direct marketing as a central tenet. But again, as I mentioned before, we need to make sure this is maximized through a multitude of channels, including digital. And Ashley's going to speak a lot more about that in a moment. We would also suggest things like an annual snapshot for your legators and a personal note. When it comes to the inquirer brochure you might develop, or an information brochure, one really important thing not to drop off is your distribution plan, because quite often these leaflets get produced, they sit in a store cupboard and they don't do nothing for nobody. So having this distribution plan is absolutely key. Maybe developing up something like a resource for the community team, like a legacy presentation. We've touched on initiating training for all members, but I would say make sure all members of the fundraising team first and foremost, then service teams, then volunteers, then board and potentially council. And of course, they are key legator prospects themselves, so that needs to be factored into any activity that you undertake. And then thinking about materials, again, how can we get this out across the, for promotion across the organization? We've got it embedded, we've got the team on board with the messaging. So even just really simple things like having banners, pop-ups, bookmarks that can go out into the retail space. There's lots of different opportunities there, and that's cross-selling at its finest, obviously. So then I have a few little considerations when it comes to the supported care elements of your ops plan. So one key major focus is looking at that stewardship plan, reviewing it, improving it. Maybe you need to initiate a new engagement program. Maybe that could involve something like a pledge or thank you call, an intender and inquirer conversion plan, little simple things, Christmas cards, bespoke events. It's all up for grabs. Then I think a key element, and again, this will come out in Ash's segment, but is the case study element that is so important in terms of getting stories across and motivating people. So you probably want to think about a portfolio and developing that, and also looking at developing your legacy champions. Who else can help you get that message out there? And then probably quite a significant one, might take a bit of time, but have a look at improving supporter care and finance team legacy processes. I don't think I've ever gone to an organization where they've had it, stitched up. So I think there's always a bit of opportunity there. And then these other elements, which I've classified as other, I would say extremely important. So one is hopefully to continue with your Will to Give membership, ensuring all your benefits are accessed and maximized. The second one I would say would be supporting Will to Give awareness activity through the provision of case studies, PR support, interviews, attendance. So there's a huge opportunity there to get your message out while supporting all these things. And then have a look at that legacy pipeline plan that hopefully you started to get in place, building on the Sector Matters notifications, but making sure it's as effective as possible. So to conclude, from my point of view, whatever your organization has or has not done over the last few days, weeks, months, years, there's a real opportunity, especially over the next few years. And now is the time to really make that legacy information accessible. You've got a really good opportunity to capitalize on. And you need to make sure that your charity is front of mind. So, and one last point is that legacy fundraising is that long-term game. It's not, you have to, keep working at it consistently to see the return. It's not about one-off campaigns. It's about building, it's about sustaining engagement over the whole journey and helping people feel inspired, being able to trust the charity with that legacy gift for years and generations to come. And that is me for now. Ash.
Morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Ellie. I'm just going to give, I was making some notes while Ellie was speaking there, and I'm doing that from the perspective of having been a director of income generation for a few major national and international charities, and also a chief executive as well, and a prospective board member. And that is that this is the stat that Ellie gave us right at the beginning there, that 4% of investment in fundraising is given to legacy marketing, and yet 44% of income comes from legacy marketing across the board, is absolutely stark. So why would that be? Why do we have such a disconnect between spend and income? And that's because there's such a disconnect between the activity that generates the income and actually seeing the income. Yeah. And you can classically expect to see between 5 and 7 years between a significant push on communicating and talking about legacies to actually seeing some income. So one clear example, the first hospice capital bill that I was involved in over here in England was in, the campaign ran from 2008 to 2011, and the new hospice opened in 2011. And legacy income didn't budge until 2016. And then suddenly there was a huge spike in legacy income that came in. And sometimes, and it was incredibly important, and one of the reasons why people were responding to that need to build and create and support a new hospice, and they were choosing to do that by giving in their will, because for them, that was the methodology that suited them. They didn't have any cash, they weren't able to set a regular gift, they weren't about to jump out of a plane or run a marathon, but the one thing they could do to support the thing they cared about was to make a contribution in their will. And we as fundraisers and as stewards of charity budgets it's difficult sometimes to get that argument across, say, let's invest and let's keep investing, even though we're not going to see any money for the next 5 years, which quite often is after the term of that member of staff or after the term of that trustee. But it's incredibly important that we have that long view. And so a shortcut to this, we could have had a webinar of 10 seconds that basically said, talk about legacy fundraising and giving wheels all the time to everybody. That would be basically the shorthand. But of course, we've got to then provide a plan for that. And so it does need continuous action. And I think the thought I had when Ellie was talking about proposition, I'll touch on proposition and show you how we talk about that in a second. Giving in a will is quite often, for almost everyone who does it, the most significant charitable contribution they'll be able to make in their lifetime. And therefore, for me, we don't position giving in wills as an ask. This is an opportunity. There is a shared goal here. And that is about the outcomes of the charitable organization that we all care about. And the giving in a will is the opportunity for that person to make the most significant contribution to the thing they really desperately care about. And I think our job as fundraisers is merely to communicate that opportunity and to handhold through the process that allows an individual to make a sensible contribution for themselves. But it is the most obvious personal opportunity. And I think also what's key for us right now in 2022, our audiences, the people that care about the charities that we're fortunate enough to work for, they have never been more open to that conversation. The last 2 years of going through the pandemic has meant that it's possible to have much more open, direct, and clearer conversations with an audience about, okay, how can we talk about gifts in wills? But again, as an opportunity for engagement, opportunity for someone achieving their personal objectives. Yeah, so we've kind of got a doorway that's opened much wider, I think, now, that allows us to talk about this stuff in clearer, more direct, and less kind of, oh, sorry to mention this because we feel nervous about talking about people, what happens when they die. But actually, this is an opportunity for them to achieve something magnificent that will continue on, as Ellie said, for another generation quite often after they've gone, continue to achieve their charitable objectives even after they go. The third point, just to touch on again something Ellie said, legators are absolutely major donors. One of the challenges is that, again, how many of you would look at your team and see the effort and the resource and the investment you might make in someone who potentially has said they might leave you £50,000. They're going to give you £50,000 as a donation. Someone walked into the building and said, I'm interested in giving you 50K. You'd treat them well. They'd have introductions to the chief exec or some of the trustees, and you might get a personal visit and a site visit, and you'd certainly get lots of communication and Christmas cards, etc., as Ellie was describing. But quite often you see a disconnect between how legators are treated and the average residuary legacy, Ellie, what is it, 48 latest? Am I in the ballpark? I can't remember. It's around there, okay? It's around 48,000, the average residuary. So residuary being, after my friends and family are sorted, you can have the rest of my estate. So the average value of those is about 48,000 now. So if that was the donor, you treat them like royalty. You treat them as a major donor. But why aren't we doing that with pledges? And all the evidence against we should be doing that. And lastly, something, Ellie, that I've done a lot of work on in my time, various charities, is relationships with solicitors, particularly where there's local impact. The solicitor, who is the conduit between the individual and the will, can often be a key decision maker in how that person chooses to engage. And in two ways. One, in promoting the fact that they should be thinking about charitable giving in their will in the first place. And then secondly, and this is absolutely surprising, every time I've worked with local solicitors, the solicitor quite often has a significant contribution in where that charitable gift goes. There may be a donor who has a massive connection with your charity, but I think the latest, the last time I did this, about 1 in 8 of the solicitors we talked to, about 1 in 8 people would come in and say, okay, yes, I want to leave some money to a charity. But about half of them didn't really have an idea of which charity to support. And the solicitor was really, really powerful in being able to say, well, how about this charity over here? How about this local organization? Are you interested in animals? How about this? Are you interested in local care? How about this organization? And therefore the relationship with the solicitor, and it's part of that back-end admin process. So one of the things we've always worked very hard to achieve is make sure that we have a really, really great relationship with our local solicitors, because what they want is an easy relationship where particularly the charity is supportive and helpful in providing information, but particularly is not chasing them for money that's going through probate every 2 weeks. Yeah, it takes quite a while sometimes for the money to actually come through and be released to the charity. And what solicitors hate is the charity saying, phone them up and chasing them, etc. So having that positive relationship with solicitors is really important. Okay, I'm going to show you some stuff in a second, and I'm going to take you through a couple of recent examples that we worked on about how we do this. But just the background to how we approach this. A Giving in Wills campaign is exactly the same as any other fundraising campaign. It's just that the proposition we're offering and the relationship that we're offering with the individual is different, but everything else around it is the same. So for us, it always starts with audience. As Ellie rightly said, there's quite often a focus on cold, on going out and trying to attract new people and bring them in. Legacies are the most unlikely gift you will ever get from your database of supporters, and recruiting from cold is the most difficult type of fundraising you can do. So combining those is actually a real challenge. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't be putting that message out there. And I talk about opening doors quite a lot. We should have a doorway that's wide open that says, here's how you can support the work that we do by walking through our Giving in Wills door. But the most likely audience are those that have already expressed their support for you through their giving. So the first process that we would have is an analysis of the database. Who have we got? What evidence do we see in their giving of a relationship with us? And therefore, the amount of previous giving is important. The longevity of their relationship is important, and the type of giving is important. So we do a lot of work in the medical charity space. We do a lot of work with hospices and with hospital charities, and also with medical charities associated with specific conditions. And so what we're looking for is evidence of significant giving over a long period of time, and specifically related to that condition, or particularly within hospitals. If it was an in memoriam gift, that's an extremely big flag that waves in front of us. So we will be looking to target our communication to those that we feel are most likely. Yeah. And we do that because if we're running, as Ellie rightly said, a multimedia campaign where we're launching a direct mail pack, that costs quite a bit of money per head, whereas social media and digital and online, we're able to spread our net much wider for much cheaper. Yeah, but it is worth investing in that direct communication with those individuals that we've identified are likely to have a much higher propensity to give. We want to have that direct focus. Yeah, and what we shouldn't do, and this applies to all fundraising at the moment, we shouldn't just think that, oh, let's just run a digital campaign, as Ellie said, tick the box. We've talked about legacies, we've talked about Giving in Wills, brilliant. Right, let's move on to the next dog walk or the next event. We've got to make sure that we are comfortable that all those people that we really want to have this conversation with, we honestly feel that we've given them the chance to have that. So during the pandemic, for example, there were lots of fundraising campaigns, and we worked on many for emergency funding support, etc. And digital only campaigns worked really, really well. But when we delivered multimedia campaigns with direct mail included, we actually saw that the digital side was accounting for about a quarter of the income. 3/4 of income was coming through traditional means, through something in an envelope delivered through the door, or a personal communication, phone, whatever it might be, personal contact with that individual. So the most important type of giving in wills, it's most important to use the media that's most appropriate for that audience. So we would normally have an approach where we'd have a digital campaign that reaches out to everybody. We'd identify that audience as most likely to give. They would receive a direct mail communication, but we'd also, right at the top of the pyramid, and if you remember your Pareto principle, your 80-20 rule, you will be getting 80% of your income from 20% of the people that support you. So looking right at the very tip of that diamond, the top of the pyramid, how do we communicate there? So quite often we will be pulling out maybe 20, 30, 50 individuals, and we'll be employing hand signing. We'll get the chair of board of trustees or the chief exec to top and tail something that's personal and specific to that individual where there's a significant or higher value relationship. Yeah, just as you would if you were looking after, if you were a salesperson looking after your customers, your best customers, the ones that have bought the most from you in the past, you'd make sure they got the platinum standard service. And we just apply exactly the same logic to that. So it's about focusing on audience. Proposition, as Ellie said, is absolutely key. I think we fall into the trap sometimes when we communicate about gifts in wills and going, oh, our charity, and we're a charity and we do lots of stuff and it costs £6 million a year or £2 million a year or £25 billion a year to do what we do. Can we have a gift in your will? What motivates people to give is achieving a goal. And the more smart you can be, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely, the more specific and tangible you can be with your fundraising proposition, the more likely someone is to say, that looks and sounds like me. That's something that I'd like to sign up to. Yeah. And so we always make sure we're trying to give people specifics and opportunities to understand that their gift doesn't just float off into this huge, great cauldron of expenditure. It achieves something specific. It delivers an outcome and a goal for the beneficiary that we all care about. So just as you would do in an appeal with regular giving or any kind of other fundraising, why are we encouraging you to do this? Because giving in a will is a solution to a problem. So let's explore the problem and tell you how your gift in the will is going to be part of the solution. Yeah, and I'll show you how we do that in a sec. Third thing is media, as we talked about. So once we know who we're talking to, we know what the proposition is, right, how do we communicate? And that's where digital DM, high-end DM would come in. Timing is also important. We've all got busy calendars. Yeah, we've all got our plans. We've generally got a year's cycle. Well, before the pandemic, we kind of had our yearly cycle, didn't we? We went around and Christmas was there and we had our summer thing and our series of events and we had various times in the year we were comfortable. We're kind of out of that cycle now. We're on a linear journey back to whatever the new normal is going to be once we get through Brexit, pandemic, cost of living crisis, etc. But we will end up at some landing pad of safety where we feel, okay, we're back in the new normal now. So what's the challenge? What's the problem to which a decision to leave a gift in a will now is the solution to that? How do we give people the opportunity to understand that their gift is part of that journey and part of that solution? And when do we communicate that? We do a lot of work on testing of timing, of looking at when do you talk to people about this stuff, yeah? And if we think about the likely demographic and the likely age group of people that we would want to be talking to about giving in wills, what we found is that August, slap bang in the middle of the summer holidays, is actually a really effective time to talk about it. That's not saying you can only do it in August, you can't talk about it anywhere else. But quite often it's tough and it's a challenge to find times in the calendar when we can get this little window of opportunity to talk about this stuff. We've found, and we've got campaigns going out this summer, so we've found that August is a good time because the kind of people we want to talk to are not on holiday and school holidays. Because if for those who've got kids, as you all know, it costs a bloody fortune. So people tend to stay at home during August. So it gives that little bit of window of opportunity. There's not much going on. So we've had some, we also do quite a lot of work on legacies about early in the year, January, February. We just started a new year thinking about the forward planning. Can we talk to you about something serious? But we're trying to find that window where we can just go, can we talk to you about this? Can we talk to you about something that's a bit deeper, a bit more serious than the other fundraising propositions we have? And then lastly is creative. So the last thing we do is think, right, what does it look like? And what are the words and what are the pictures? Okay. And I'll show you now a couple that we've delivered in the last year or so. So hopefully, Claire, this is going to work again. We tested this earlier, did we not? Yeah. Okay, everyone happy? Can you see that? If I can have some profusive nods to let me know that you can see that, that'd be great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so this is a children's hospice over here. So this is Rainbows. Now this is full on, okay? And this is the brochure that Ellie was mentioning. This is not what we send people as part of the marketing campaign. This is really important. What we do is adopt what we call a two-stage approach. And that is, the first stage is reaching out to our audience. And usually what we're saying is, giving in wills is incredibly important. It is the solution to problems that we currently have, an enabler of the work we wish to do in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. Many people choose to support us like this, but we'd like to know if you'd be interested in learning more and finding out. Okay, so what we have effectively as the marketing strategy is a two-stage campaign. The first stage is a simple, direct communication where we're saying to people, let us know if this is something of interest to you. What we are not doing is sending them all the information up front, unbidden, about all the different ways you can support and all the different ways of legacy giving. And the reason for that is because, firstly, the cost of it, the cost of producing an all singing, all dancing piece of information is quite significant. And almost all of the time, it is just not cost effective to send a copy of that out for everyone. And if you imagine the kind of response rates that we'd be expecting to get, if we were, as a off the top of my head, 6,000 audience of a direct mail campaign, we were looking at responses in the region of something like 120 to 180. Okay. So it's an enormous cost to create something that is not going to be seen and not going to be used for the vast majority of the audience. So it's partly a cost issue, but mostly, to be honest with you, we do not go out with a message of, please give us some money in your will. What we talk about is how important giving in wills is, how many people choose to do it, how effective it is for us, and the fact that we are able to support and advise people who wish to give in that way. And that's because, particularly for those of us working in the medical space, we're working in hospice, hospitals, medical charities, we are going to have members of our audience who are at the stage of end of life, or they've just lost someone, or they're in an incredibly difficult personal situation themselves. Yeah. And I've seen where single stage campaigns, where the proposition is, please, can you give us some money in your will because it's really important, creates massive offense for those people that you're unlucky enough to just hit at the wrong time. Yeah. Much, much safer. And I think more respectful of relationship as well as a two-stage where we say, this is available. This is really important. Here's the information we're able to give you. Here's how we can support you making a decision, but let us know if this is for you. Yeah. And so our two-stage approach is we have a letter, a simple letter that goes out, written, as Ellie said, in the right voice. And for some, that might be the chief exec. I used to be a chief exec. I'm a boring bloke in a suit. No one gives a damn what I think. You know, it's the people that provide the service that actually people want to hear about. So almost always we'll be writing in the voice of those that provide the service. Yeah. But we'll go out and say, this is really important. Can we have your expression of interest? And what we'd expect to see, let's say at this 6,000 where 120 respond, we'd expect about 50-50. Half would come back saying, yeah, okay. And we give some options. We say, the options are, I've already done this. Brilliant. On the database, flag, pledger, potential legator, start treating like a major donor. I'm already thinking about this. Same thing. Yeah, basically, hot prospect, brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm interested. Please send me your stuff. Please send me the brochure or the literature that you have. Fantastic. There you go. Or I'm interested. I'd like to have a chat with someone about this. Brilliant. And again, I'll show you how we offer that. Fantastic. But the fifth option is also really crucial. And the fifth option on that first communication is, I'd really rather you didn't talk to me about this stuff again. I don't like it. I'm not comfortable. And we expect about half and half in this initial conversation. Yeah. And I think that's, again, it's respecting the audience. It's saying, this is something we'd like to talk about, but we're just getting to the gate. We're not coming into the garden. We're getting to the gate and going, hi guys, is this a conversation that you have to have? Can we talk about this? Allowing people to make their own choices. Yeah. So in the direct communication, that's what we're going to do. Okay. Let me show you the creatives. So this is Rainbow Gifts here for Rainbow's Hospice. So there are times when we brand our legacy giving, this is one of these occasions, it made sense. We created what's called Rainbow Gifts to try and define the way that giving to the Children's Hospice have. So there's Addie on the front cover, amazing picture, obviously. And you can see it's a Children's Hospice, of course, but it's bright, it's positive. It doesn't matter what the charity is. Every single piece of communication we've ever delivered about giving in wills is positive. This is not, oh, you're going to die and can we have some money? This is what an opportunity there is for you to support the thing you care about so much. And we're going to give you that positivity. We're going to show you the effect that you can still have even after your death. So the first page, and this is A4. Yeah. So it's significant. It's chunky. It's a serious subject. It's a big decision. The materials we provide therefore match the seriousness of that decision. So here's the initial, here's who we are. Because again, we're creating something that might go to someone that doesn't understand the charity, that might simply be looking. I've been working for a children's charity where we were contacted by a bank who said their client wants to support you. He's looking around for something in memory of his mum. And we said, oh, that's lovely. Thank you very much. And they said, yeah, well, here's £800,000. We'd never heard of him before. Didn't live anywhere in the area. He just wanted to do that. So you need something that explains who you are and what you do. So this is just one page saying, this is what Rainbows is. This is what we do. Next page down, how important is gifts in wills? You will each have your own percentage of this, yeah? But I bet you it's significant. So the gift in the will funds for Rainbows, the care of 1 in 5 children. Again, you'll see we're getting out of numbers here. We're not saying 20%. We're not saying X million out of Y million. What we're saying is the care of 1 in 5 children is fully paid for by gifts in wills. That really defines and shows the importance of this type of giving, yeah? We know it's 20%. 1 in 5 kids relies on giving in wills to fund their care, okay? And then we tell stories. The best way of getting this conversation across is by telling stories. So here's the story of Heidi, and there's lovely Heidi with Sarah. And this is Tina, Heidi's mum, who's talking about this. So again, this is A4. So we've got 2 pages, there they are. So we've got 2 pages of story. We're telling the story of children's hospice care, yeah? And sometimes I think we get, Ellie and Claire, when we're talking about this, I think we get stuck sometimes, and people get stuck. We're so hooked up on the logistics and how this stuff works and how you talk to, etc. Sometimes we forget to tell stories here. And I think it's really important that we still, even in this space, we're reminding people why would you choose to support us? Why would you choose to make the decision to support the charity in the first place? And then we talk about legacy. So we make a big effort to make sure, let's tell stories, let's give people that journey, that opportunity, show them what they can do. The next bit is really important. And this is Joan. Joan passed away and left a very significant gift, as we'll see in a second, to Rainbows. And this is Jill, Joan's niece. We always, wherever possible, try and include an example of a gift that was given and how it was spent. And the reason for that is because we want to give people the understanding and the justification and to see where their money is going to be spent, give them that reassurance that this is the incredible one-off opportunity gift that we've been talking about. But also, it's really important to tick off a couple of boxes here. One of the things that if you speak to people in focus groups, as we have, I have done many times, what you'll hear is, I'm worried that my family will be angry with me for not leaving all my money to them. And a reassurance in the communication that we give to people, I think, is often quite useful. And so quite often we will have, here it's the niece. In other campaigns and other similar information, it'll be the spouse. I was so thrilled that my husband decided to leave some money to the charity that we both supported, because I know how important it was to him. And it's wonderful to know that his passion is continuing after his death. And don't forget, for those of us that are engaged in in-memory fundraising, where that's a particularly important issue, fundraising where you're dealing with a charity for someone who it is part of their end of their life and that story. In-memory fundraising is a thing we do that gets us through. It's part of the grief management process. It's also an incredibly positive act that you can achieve in the memory of that loved one. And so being able to achieve that through a legacy gift, not just through doing the next run or the Mill and Walk for Life, as I walked past yesterday and last weekend when I was out and about. There are different ways of achieving that goal, but leaving a gift and a legacy is in a will is also really important. So there's Joan's gift, and there's Jill talking about Joan. And she was a local school teacher, and she was never married, never had any kids, and she gave a very significant gift. And when Rainbows received that, it was in the pandemic, so they had to work it around the space. They invited Jill and a couple of other members of the family to come in and see the hospice and see the work that her aunt's gift was going to be giving. And that was incredibly motivational for her. And now she's a committed supporter as well. And then here's what we do. This is how we're illustrating Joan's gift. Yeah, so we called it a rainbow gift because the gift doesn't just do one thing. And really importantly, it doesn't just float down to this big £6.3 million per year of spending. It achieves specific stuff. So we won't read all of them, but you can see. So we're talking about the largest share goes into the community nursing team, 35%. But here's the bit of the gift that went towards buying plants and play equipment for the garden. Here's the little bit of money that was spent to enable birthday parties. So when a kid at the hospice has a birthday, there's a bit of money there to allow them to go buy cake and balloons and silly hats. Yeah. Here's the 5% that invest in the days out fund so that kids can have trips out to local parks, zoos, etc. I love this bit. So this was the 2%. They have a hydrotherapy pool. So they bought some new inflatables to the pool when the gift came in. This is the bit that went into supporting siblings. And this is the element that went into supporting the bereavement support service. Now, this is an example. This money, this split didn't happen in this way in terms of defined giving. It wasn't restricted. It was an unrestricted gift. But this is an illustration of how the hospice uses unrestricted gifts to support each. So what we're able to do in this breakdown is show all the different ways that the gift is giving. It's also a lovely opportunity for us to educate the audience of all the different things that this charity is doing and how it supports beneficiaries. Yeah. But also some of this stuff, the 2% on the splash, is immediate. There's an immediate right now impact of your decision. As soon as that gifting will lands, you're making a difference to the lives of life limited children. But also here, this is the 35%, over a third is long-term investment in a team that's going to deliver benefit and value for many years to come. Yeah. So the gift and the will can be all these things: immediate impact, long-term security, helps the future of the charity. This one's really important. We talk about this a lot. I'll touch on this in a second, because we've just delivered a focus group and talked to a large group of people about recognition. How do we say thank you? What do we do? Ellie was saying about communication cycles. Absolutely right. We've got to have that communication. But can we offer a thank you? Can we offer an incentive? And the reason I say that is, for some people, recognition or thanks for their gift is utterly irrelevant. They couldn't care less and go away and don't bother me. For some, it is extremely important, particularly if we're offering the opportunity to recognize somebody else in respect to that gift. So the 800 grand I talked about just earlier, that came with a condition that mum's name was put on a plaque somewhere. Yeah. And the initial response from the trustees was, I'm sorry, we have a strict no names, no plaques policy. And then when they found out it was going to be 800,000, they said, where do you want the plaque? So we have to have our recognition options up front. Yeah. So for rainbows, there is going to be recognition within the garden. There's a couple of different options, and we're simply saying here, we'll talk to you about this. If you'd like to have recognition for you or your family in response to your gift, we'd love to do that. Or if you'd like to recognize somebody else in memory of a loved one, absolutely fine, come and talk to us. We open those doors and we let them know that that's an okay conversation to have. What we don't want to do with recognition, I'll tell you, we're working with a cathedral at the moment. And about 10 years ago, they needed to repair an important bit of the cathedral. And they offered anyone who gave an engraved stone in one of the replacement stones in the cathedral. And they managed to get about 20 donations, and the average gift was 58 quid. So for 58 quid, you've now got your name engraved on a stone in a 1600-year-old cathedral. That's not enough money for that. We have to have levels where we're saying, right, what is reasonable and representative? So we'll be thinking and working with our charity partners about what's the recognition. If someone decides they want to leave you £1 million, one of our charities that we support, their turnover is £1.4 million. They were left £5 million in a legacy. What do you do with that? How do you say thank you? What's appropriate? And it's helpful, and giving in wills preparation is helpful to have that conversation. What do we do? What do we feel comfortable with? Are there naming opportunities? Do we put something somewhere? Yeah. But we always talk about it because for some people, it is part of their decision, whether or not to do this or not. Yeah. And then we move into, right, here's how we're going to support you. It's a vital thing, and we say this right at the front. A will is a vital document for you, ensuring that those you care about are provided for after your death. The first point of this communication is saying, get a will. Make sure you leave a will. 1 in 8 people in the UK still die intestate, and they don't get that. It doesn't automatically go to the next of kin, doesn't automatically go. It does increase tax burden. And so it's really important to make sure this is a way of you carrying on after your loved ones. But if you can consider the charity, then fantastic. Here's how we can support you. And where possible, and it's not always possible, we like to include a direct contact, because putting a friendly face, and there's lovely Emma. So putting a friendly face into this communication is really important. I'm here for you. Yeah. I will answer any questions. I'll help you through. Here's how to contact me. So we've got our email address and we've got a phone number at the bottom of the page here as well. Rather than just contact our fundraising team or here's an info at email address. This is an incredibly personal decision. Let's make it personal. Let's offer a relationship. Yeah. And then for ABOs, it's really important that they have their promises that they make. Every penny goes to supports the work that we do. We'll always be quick, honest, and answer your questions. The people you come love first. The people you come love first. We will treat you and your loved ones with the utmost sensitivity and respect. And we won't put you under any pressure. This is quite important. People feel, oh God, as soon as I've contacted the charity, that's it. I'm never going to hear the end of it. I'm going to have a phone call every week going, have you done it yet? Have you made your decision? No. We're going to be the good guys. We're going to be respectful and honest and allow people the time and space they need to make their own decisions. Okay. Privacy is totally important. We'll never share your information. We'll never tell anybody else that you've done this. And this one, particularly for this charity, is lovely. You can always come and see us. If you want to be able to come and see and really get and understand how your gift's going to make a difference, Great, let us know, come and engage, we'll show you around. Now, I know not everyone can do that, but we can all engage in a personal way. We can all set up, now a Zoom call, can't we, for 20 minutes and answer questions and talk about things, yeah? Okay, different ways. This is when we get into the kind of legal speak type stuff, right? How do we support this? So we'll talk about different types of rainbow gifts. We talk about the different types of gifts. Again, ask please if this is not familiar to you. Cash gift, you just leave some money. Specific gift, you can have my motorbike and sell it. I'm leaving my house to you. Yeah. One of my first roles when I first took over at one of the charity clients, my second day, we got a notification saying that an elderly gentleman had died, leaving his entire portfolio of property estate worth 1.8 million to us. And we looked back at the database and he'd given 15 quid as a donation about 10 years ago. Never heard of him before or since. 1.8 million comes in. So, okay, fine. But so that was the biggest that we then had to sell the properties and employ locals to do that, etc. Life interest is, you can have this for now, but then once that thing expires, there might be an investment, for example. I have an endowment fund. You can have the proceeds of the endowment fund for 10 years, but then it passes to my family, for example. And then this one is the big one, share of the estate or residuary. And this is where the value is. So the average pecuniary gift, Ellie, I'm out of date on this, it's about 6K last time I looked, but Claire, Ellie, you'll probably know more than I on the value of cash gifts. Residuary is much, much higher. So what we obviously want is once your family and friends are taken care of, then we just get everything else. And we put a little bit of information about inheritance tax. Obviously that does change over time. We put a bit of thing about inheritance tax. Here's how to find out more about inheritance tax here. Suggested wording, often not needed, but some people, if they're making their own will, if they're doing one of these wills at home, the ones you get from WH Smith or wherever, or the local stations, you can pick up your own kit, etc. Or you're doing it online, then this can be helpful. It just makes it's helpful to have the legal text in there about a residuary or a pecuniary gift. We put a glossary of terms in here as well, again, explaining what we mean by various things. Bless, look at Isla and Paige there, honestly. And then lastly, the form. So this differs from this first stage. So this is going to people that have already put their hand high in the air and said, yeah, I'm interested. Okay, so we don't need to worry about that. Don't talk to me about this stuff again. So we're just saying, yeah, I've already included you. I'm considering it, or I would welcome someone to contact me. And then you can say, right, here's the address, telephone, email, etc. Yeah, so it's just reaching out and offering that. In one of my first roles as director of income generation, this was for YMCA that supported the whole of the YMCA movement around the whole of the UK. And we had a guy who was our head of gifts in wills. And we would do 2 communications a year, reaching out to audiences saying, this is really important. What an opportunity. Can you help? Would you be interested? I'll just stop showing that. And what he would do is take the 60 or 70 positive answers, and he lived in a VW camper van. And he would then spend the next 6 months driving around the whole of the UK in his VW camper van, going and visiting everyone that had expressed an interest, saying, hi, I'm around, I'll come and see you. And he would sit down and talk and have a cup of tea and a piece of cake, etc. But he personally visited every single pledger or confirmed legator that the YMCA had. Do you know what? It was the best legacy giving program we've ever had, because we had a guy who was able to travel around the country. He had a great time because he was off sort of campsites, etc. But he would have a personal relationship with every single person that expressed a positive interest. And it was the most successful program ever. I know we can't all do that, but what we can think about is when there's a positive expression of interest, right? How do we evidence that? How do we do that? Claire, how are we doing on time? Sorry, I'm just looking.
Yeah, we're good. 20 minutes.
Wait a minute. Okay, fine. I'm just going to quickly show you another one. So again, the same kind of thing, but you'll recognize this one. Okay, so this is hospice. So firstly, this is deliberately upside down because hospice is 2 organizations. It's the hospice and it's also the children's hospice. So again, saving money and being cunning, what we did is developed a double cover. So it could be posted, it could be put in displays, and this was held at displays at the hospice. Again, for obvious reasons, there's a lot of people traveling through the hospice that they might be thinking about this kind of stuff. So we made sure that this information was prominent and available at all points in where people actually engaged, in the cafe, in the hospice itself. So the front cover is this way up if you're in the adult hospice, it was this way up if you're in the children's hospice, but basically the information inside was the same. But you can see, the kind of information, the kind of structure we're going through. So there's Heather, Chief Exec, talking about gifts and wills pays so every 7 days. So 365 days a year, 1 day a week is completely paid for by gifts and wills. That's how important it is. Here's Valerie talking about husband Harry had cancer of the pancreas, etc., etc. Yeah, this is the story of her husband's care and her decision. I decided to leave a gift in my will to them because I wanted to be sure that hospice care would still be available to my family and friends and other families in the future. So there's the expression of a legator saying, I've made this decision. I feel really great about that decision. I encourage others to do that. Again, using that personal communication. And then we talk about why make a will. It protects you and your loved ones. Here's how a gift and a will can protect hospice care for the future. This is the little section on inheritance tax. Different ways to support your will. Again, you've got the same list of 4 different ways of giving. And you'll see in both of these examples, you can see there's basically a 50-50 split between images and text. One of the things we know from focus groups is that if you send people, a 15 pages of typeface, point size 9 copy explaining everything, it's really daunting. This is often perceived as being a really difficult, challenging, hard thing to do. And in fact, it isn't. But let's make it as easy. Let's make it look and feel actually like a simple process that you just need a bit of support information to be able to do. And here's the gift that goes on giving. So this is the actual will. So David did actually give a wonderful gift of £88,784 in his will. Here's how hospice spent that money. Again, illustrative examples, but we're doing the same thing again. So it was enough to pay for a hospice nurse specialist. So 45,000 of that, hospice nurse specialist hospice care for a child, pay for the entire children's hospice care for one child, bought a new bed, bought a mobile hydraulic couch for the therapy area, vital sign monitor for patients, and social work to local families that need help at difficult times. So again, we're illustrating all the different ways, immediate and long term. Important information about creating the will. So here's the details of the legacy officer at Northern Ireland. They didn't have a particular person at that time, so we just had the legacy officer at the hospice. And then upside down, you see we've got the little arrow there, turn it upside down. And if you come in the other way, you've then got the same information about the children's hospice. And there's the story and the fact that this is the family that have been, their child was cared for. Yeah. Stop that. Okay, so the point of doing that is walking through your audience. That's walking through the person that's potentially making that decision. And we're trying to tick every box. How do I do this? We're telling you how. Why should I do this? We're telling you why. Yeah. What will my gift achieve? We're telling you. Yeah. How can I find out more information? Who can I speak to? We're telling you. Yeah. We're taking away the barriers. Yeah. We want to open this doorway to giving and wills as wide as possible and make it the easiest possible decision. But that complex information, yeah, it doesn't have to be in print. What you've just seen there, both examples are available online. We do print some. And it is helpful sometimes to have those in print. But again, we can just print 100, 200 copies. We can do it digitally. We don't have to spend a fortune creating this whole all singing or dancing thing. Yeah. And just before I shut up, you'll be glad to know. Focus group that we ran about a month ago, and we're talking to about 80 people. It's a really big one, 80 people over 2 sessions came to talk to us about supporting a particular organization that we're working with. And what came out of that really clearly, and the way that we do these focus groups, we talk about the why and what are you doing and why are we doing it and how are we doing it and what are the reasons and what are you interested in. And then we test that. And I urge you to do this. If you haven't had that conversation with supporters, Ellie and I spoke to a Northern Irish charity about 3 weeks ago, and we did a Zoom version, and we had half a dozen guys in the room, and it was really instructive, really important to understand what is it about this charity that really gets you, that really makes you want to give. So we had these 80 people in the room. If you ask people, if you tell people all the stuff that you do, and you go, what about that then? Is that important? Would you support that? People would generally go, oh yeah, oh great, yeah, brilliant. It's when they actually have to spend money, that's when you really get the information. So one of the things we do is we test propositions, and we do that by giving them money. So we buy a load of stage money like that. It's got a specimen in the front, it's got a blank on the back, yeah? So we talk about all the different things that our charity does and the way of supporting, and then we give them a wodge of cash and we ask them to spend it back. And when you get them to spend it back, that's where you really see the seriousness of how people consider they really are spending their own money on your charitable propositions. It's a really useful exercise to understand what people are really motivated and which bits of your work they really care about the most. But for Giving in Wills, what we clearly learned from this big focus group over 2 sessions was, firstly, they want the clear, specific, tangible fundraising proposition. Don't just waft on about everything that we do and how many years we've been here and all the money that we need to raise. Tell me what the problems are. Tell me the solutions to those problems. Tell me how much those solutions cost. That gives me something to hang my hat on. That gives me an opportunity, because I don't want the biggest gift I ever make to just float off into this big pot. Yeah. I want to achieve something. I want to solve a problem. I want to pay for a nurse for a year. I want to build a shed in a garden so that someone can access that. I want to pay for some outreach work into the community. I want to fund an education program in a school in Tanzania for the next year. Yeah, I want to achieve something, and the motivation to give in wills is stronger when there's that specific, smart fundraising objective that clearly comes across. The second thing people want is the chance to specify or restrict gifts. I know your finance colleagues will be throwing something at the screen at this point. Yeah, we all want unrestricted income. Of course we do. However, if you had a choice between bringing in, let's say, the average £6,000 cash gift unrestricted, or £48,000 restricted to something that you do, would you not want the £48,000? If that's the thing that's going to motivate people. And the conversation we often have with finance teams, and sometimes chief execs and board of trustees as well, is, I know you want unrestricted, of course you do. However, we all have budgets at the beginning of the year. If we can go and get £48,000, it's restricted to a thing that we do, well, that's fine. Let's spend it on that thing, because the £48,000 we had in the budget, we can now release that money and that can go and be spent on something else. Yeah. The challenge is for all of us, surely, is how do we get the most money into the hands of those that deliver the work as soon as possible? That should be our opportunity. And if by restricting, offering people the opportunity to achieve that specific tangible goal, if we can increase and incentivize a greater gift through that conversation, for me, we go for it. Yeah. And we deal with the finance, and they hate it because it's restricted funds and it's pots, it's annoying, and you have to go tough. That's our job. Yeah, our job is to bring the most money into the building as we humanly can, and let's go and spend it on the stuff that needs doing. So have the courage to have that conversation with your finance colleagues. I would gently advise you not having to do it myself, obviously. Recognition options we talked about. Have a plan. How are you going to say thank you? What are you going to do? If someone walks in and says, I'm going to leave you my estate, I'm going to leave you 100K, but I'd like something for mum or dad or me, what are you going to do? What are you going to say? And I would strongly recommend you don't leave that until it happens. You have the conversation, you have the thought process in advance, so that when it happens, you have a plan, you have a structure, and it's equitable for everybody. What you don't want suddenly is loads of plaques on trees or stones in gardens or things on a wall or something like that. Have a plan for how you say thank you. But most donors, this last focus group session was really important. They don't want the big flashy. What they want is just simple opportunities. Yeah, say thank you to me. Don't spend a load of money. Don't want it flash, but I quite like the idea of just being there, of having that recognized, that my contribution has meant something. It's touched something. There's something physical and tangible there. So the best ones, even a simple, a book of recognition, book of thanks, pieces of art are really helpful. Hospice has one outside the adult hospice in recognition of people that supported the Capital Build. It's just a piece of artwork, a little sculpture, but it's got some names on it. So whatever's appropriate for your charity, but have a plan for how you say thank you. And lastly, ongoing communication. This is not a one-off. Ellie is absolutely right at the start of the session. This is the beginning of a journey, but you need to continue that journey. Okay, it will take from a standing start 5 to 7 years before you're able to show any real evidence that this is coming in, and you will see some if you're able to carry on that. But what you can't do is just do one-off communication about giving in wills and then forget about it, tick a box, move off. This has to be a continual conversation. Yeah, and so the courage has to be found to invest and to continue invest in that conversation. You will see the rewards and the benefits of that. It will take a while, but once you get to that 5-7 year point, the marketing you did in year 2 then kicks in year 3, it kicks in year 4, kicks in, and that helps you to carry on. Yeah, but it is a long-term process. Okay,
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you very much.
So we've got, what is it, Claire, 10 minutes?
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. There was a wee comment earlier in the session there, just from Jocelyn at NICFA. She's, highlighting that traditional work still, telephone fundraising outperformed pre-COVID levels, and the public's response to emergency appeals via direct mail was above forecast. So just you touched on that earlier on.
Yeah, we saw some extraordinary results during COVID. I think phone, I'm a big fan of phone. I started my fundraising career in 1993 on the phone. So that's where, so getting on 30 years now. It's brilliant. It's personal. It's there. We've got to be really, really careful how we do this. And obviously the communications around legacy, I would never want anyone to phone up and ask someone to leave money in a will. But I would really like to have that conversation about, is this something we can talk about? Would you like any more information? Can we help as part of the journey? Have you got any questions that we can help to answer?
Just looking to see, there's no questions coming in, but of course I have a couple, so I'll start with mine. Do you have any hints or tips for, and I don't want to be ageist, younger fundraisers who haven't made their will, they maybe don't have a house yet, they're not married, and they're the ones that are having to have these conversations with people, and are maybe don't feel comfortable doing it because they're not in a place where they've written their own will and they've left a gift to a charity?
Okay, so as an old person, I feel that Ellie's probably better placed to understand.
I'm old as well. Let's see. It's just good lighting. Oh gosh, I think
it's a good question.
It is, and I think I'm thinking back to whenever I would have started out, and legacy, I just inherited legacy as part of your remit. For me, it's always about knowledge. It's always about, if I am empowered, if I if I have had researched information, had some conversations, maybe again reaching out to local solicitors. I know that Will to Give has an amazing resource with regard to Michael Graham, who I thought was going to be joining us. I'm so disappointed he's not here because he's such an amazing proponent of all the work all the charities do. Somebody like, try and identify somebody like him who's very personable and very able to explain maybe the sort of legalities and the complexities, if that's what you're worried about. I think there's no substitute for going out there and doing it as well, in terms of with any kind of fundraising. It's about getting out there and understanding your audience a little bit better. And with Ash saying about starting on the phones, like I can remember going out door to door, and you get such a different experience when you actually do it. And at the end of the day, you're connecting with another human being. I think sometimes we do over egg things, because the core message that you're putting out is, this is your opportunity. This is your opportunity to support our amazing work. But you're signposting somebody to go. You're not having to have the legalese knowledge. Mm-hmm. It's you're directing them to a local solicitor who is going to be the person that actually executes any of the legalities involved. It's not up to them.
Can I just add? I think that again, looking at that specific question, it depends on the position we take. I think if we're asking people to leave a gift in their will, I think that's very different, from being someone who can enable someone to make the decision that they want to make. So I think that our role as fundraisers is simply about enabling and providing a holding hand that allows people to make the decision that's right for them in a non-pressured, friendly, welcoming environment. That would be my view, and we do that through various things. I'm entirely comfortable in communications that ask people to leave a gift in a will, but that should be by a peer. It should be by someone who has been there and done that. And so quite often in the equivalents, the brochures you've just seen there, we will have the husband, the wife, the mum, the dad, etc., who will say, I've done this because this is my experience. It brings me comfort, it brings me pleasure, it brings me inspiration to know that I will still be achieving the goals that I want to achieve in life after my life has ended. And I encourage you to join me in doing the same. I don't think we can have a communication that says, I've not done this, and bluntly, I'm 40 years away from thinking about this kind of stuff. But you should probably, because whoa, you know, we got to be careful about how we communicate that.
Yeah.
But so fundraisers as enablers, I think.
I am going to quickly just share the wills notification report that we send out on a monthly basis. I have one more question as well, so you can be thinking about that while I go through this.
Fine.
It was just in terms of your brochure that you showed there for the hospice. Why do you put residuary as the third? I think it was the third option rather than the first in the list. What's the thinking behind that if we want to encourage more people to consider residuary first?
A good question. I think we work up in kind of increasing levels of commitment. So if we produce a cash appeal, for example, we won't start with the highest ask. We'll start with the loss leader, the door opener, and then we'll give people illustrations. So if we're producing a cash appeal, we're quite often 3 or 4 different specific options, saying this is what you could give and this is what this gift could achieve. And we would generally leave the highest till last. Yeah. So I haven't tested that. And the trouble with this stuff, Claire, and everybody is, as you know, it's impossible to do split tests. We couldn't have a communication where we put residuary at the top and then residuary at the bottom and then find out which one is more successful, because the numbers are so small and the timescales are so great, we're not going to know. So our comfort zone is in giving an ascending order, as it were. Now, here's the levels of commitment that you could choose to make. Yeah.
Okay.
I have
Thank
the
you.
levels actually. I had a wee check there. 2020 average values. So this is for the UK as a whole, not Northern Ireland. But the average residual is £50,900.
Oh, it's £2,000 off. Okay.
And pecuniary is 3,400.
Oh, that's dropped. Okay. Fair enough.
So just Jocelyn made a good point as well, that, you know, and as a younger fundraiser, you know, you're maybe looking at empowering your trustees or your chief executive, you know, to share that message. So this is our wills notification report that goes out to all of our Will to Give members. You as there's 2 tiers of membership for Will to Give, tier 1, which is 295, and tier 2, which is 695. So everybody, no matter what tier they are, get this report, which includes all of the beneficiaries by organisation that have received a charitable gift, the types of gift left in receipt, and the solicitors. So you can see just it's a list, the number of gifts that they're given, and if they're a Will to Give member. Now, as a tier 2 member, the tier 2 Will to Give member will also receive a copy of the will in which they've received a gift. So they will have the detail of who left that gift. They will have the detail of when that person died, when they last updated their gift, as well as who else they left gifts to. So that's really important information to have. And then obviously our tier 1 members won't receive the copy of the gift, but those tier 1 members are usually the ones who aren't receiving gifts on a regular basis. But equally, it's important for them to know what other organisations in their space are receiving regular gifts on an ongoing basis. So we get the numbers, so we can see we're a bit behind in that we know that of these 100 gifts, quite a lot of these people have died in 2021, so not this year. We're still probating gifts from last year. 28 were residuary, 71 were pecuniary, and number specific gifts was 1. And then we also have a list of the solicitors, which is again really handy because we can see a pattern of solicitors who are more regularly writing wills that have charitable gifts in them. So referring back to what you were saying, Ellie, you know, that they are, you know, proactively asking or encouraging people who come into their offices to consider leaving a gift in their will. So, you know, that's to us our standout benefit of being a Will to Give member, as well as, you know, these training sessions that we run and our monthly meetings where we get together. You know, we have an opportunity to chat to Michael, who we mentioned earlier. He's our solicitor and our legal advisor. And yeah, just really basically sharing support, because it is challenging and it is difficult and it's constant, and sometimes it does get a bit lost amongst all of the amazing community fundraising and events and everything else that's going on. So we're just about hitting 11 now, so I'm just going to stop sharing and check with nothing else in the chat. No, nothing else. So we have recorded this. I'm going to stop the recording in a second, and we will put it up on the Will to Give YouTube channel, and then the guys at Pebblebeach are going to put it up as well. But thank you both very much, Ellie and Ash, for joining us. It was great.
You're very
always,
welcome.
always learn something.
I was just going to say, we are, Ellie's over in Warringstown, I'm in Brighton, but I get over quite a lot, but we're always here, and we're quite happy to have a conversation. So if you feel that there's something you'd like to talk about, there's no cost, there's no obligation to that. We're not expecting, work out. If we can be helpful to answer some questions, then please do get in touch and let us know. So there's a specific thing you'd like to explore in more detail, then great, just give us a shout, and Ellie and I are happy to make some time for you.
Excellent. You've got loads of thank yous coming in here. I'll not read them all out. You can read them yourself.
And if you want to reach out, you can get us obviously via email. There's a sort of general hello@pebblebeachfundraising.com, or you can get Ash or myself. So
super.
Have a great one, guys.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.